Once more Gunnar was dragged through the alleys and made to kneel before the king of Kaupang in the dark hall. Rorik kneeled beside him, stripped of his sword and chainmail, blood running down his face from a gash where an iron shield rim had struck his forehead. Both had their wrists tied behind their backs. Ari stood over them with his sword drawn, and a crowd had gathered in the hall. Starkad's corpse was laid out on a table nearby. Vigdis had wailed when he had been brought in, and flung herself on the body. But now she stood in front of Rorik and Gunnar. "Somebody give me a knife!" she screeched. She spat in Rorik's face, then did the same to Gunnar. "I'll butcher the pair of them like pigs at the autumn slaughtering," she hissed. "They killed my son, my Starkad."
"Enough, woman,"
Orm growled. He was sitting on his throne.
"You never have a good word to say about Starkad when he was alive."
"What are you talking about?"
Vigdis screamed, rounding on her husband.
"You were the one who ran him down, saying he was too rash."
"And he proved it by getting himself killed," rumbled Orm. "He was a fool to think he could fight Rorik. I told him, but he wouldn't listen."
"Is that it, then?"
screeched Vigdis.
"It was Starkad's fault, so you're going to let your precious Rorik get away with murdering him? He was our son!"
"I know that as well as you do, Vigdis," said Orm. "I'm not going to let Rorik get away with anything. He must pay for what he's done."
"What does that mean?"
said Vigdis.
"I want to see him die slowly."
"Oh, he's going to die," said Orm. "But he owes me compensation. Pay me the blood price for my son, Rorik, and I will make sure your death is swift and painless. How much Greek silver do you have hidden away?"
Gunnar glanced at the big man kneeling beside him. Rorik smiled but didn't reply to Orm, and Ari prodded his shoulder with the end of his sword. "Your master is waiting for an answer," he snapped. "Speak up!" Rorik looked coolly at Ari and then turned to Orm.
"I don't have any more silver arm rings, if that's what you mean," he said. "Not that Starkad were worth one." "So my son was worth less than a slave boy?" growled Orm.
Rorik shrugged. Vigdis spat in his face once more, and Rorik laughed at her. Gunnar glimpsed Thorkel looking on from the crowd. Thorkel gave a slight shake of the head, and Gunnar knew he was saying he couldn't help. "We should just cut their throats and be done with it," said Ari.
"Not the boy," said Orm. "I might get something for him."
"Maybe so," said Ari. "But your son would still be alive if that boy hadn't distracted him. Starkad was more than holding his own till then." "Liar!" Gunnar yelled. "He would never have beaten Rorik, and you know it. You were sneaking up behind Rorik to stab him in the back." Ari hit him hard with his free hand, knocking him sideways. Pain shot through Gunnar's head and his cheek throbbed as he lay on the floor.
"Very well," said Orm. "The boy dies too. Take them down to the harbour. One of them is a slave, and the other can die a slave's death."
"This is more like it," said Vigdis, cackling. "I'm going to enjoy this."
Gunnar was pulled to his feet and dragged out of the hall with Rorik. As the crowd swarmed round them, Ari led the procession through the dark alleys, with a flaming torch held high. Vigdis beside him. At one point, an old man emerged from an alley and nearly bumped into them.
"Forgive me," said the old man. "I didn't mean to get in your way."
"Move aside, you fool!" Ari yelled, roughly pushing past him. The old man did as he was told, but not before Gunnar felt something being pressed into his hand. It was a small knife, and suddenly he remembered the bone-handled blade the old man had used in the godhouse. Gunnar tried to look over his shoulder, straining against the men holding him. Had it been the same old man? And what was he supposed to do with such a small knife? It wouldn't be any good as a weapon. He might be able to cut the binding on his wrists with it, but he was surrounded and wouldn't have a hope of escaping. He would have to bide his time, waiting for a better opportunity. "You men, fetch more torches," yelled Ari at last. They had reached the harbour. The tide was out and mud stretched beyond the ships to the drowning posts. Gunnar glanced at Rorik again. The big man was smiling with his eyes closed. "Rorik!" Gunnar hissed at him. "Rorik!" "He isn't listening, boy," said Ari. "He's halfway at the afterlife already. Hurry up, lads. Let's get him lashed to the posts. The tide will turn soon. A couple of men shoved Gunnar and Rorik off the quayside. They landed in the mud and Gunnar's breath was driven from his body. He held on to the knife though, keeping it hidden in his clenched fist, whilst a couple of men lashed him and Rorik to the posts.
Well, Rorik, are you ready to die?
Harry shouted from the quayside.
Any last words for us? Or has your wits finally failed you?
Gunnar looked up at Harry and Vigdis and the crowd. He thought about the knife again and turned it over in his hand. He would have to wait until he was under the water to cut himself free. What then? There was a crowd watching, so he'd have to swim off underwater to escape. But where could he go? If he headed out to sea, he'd drown just the same, and what about Rorik?
Well, there's one good thing about dying, Harry, said Rorik. At least after tonight, I won't ever have to look at your ugly face again.
There was a great roar of laughter from the crowd, and Harry scowled. I should have killed you when I had the chance, he yelled.
You mean when 4 men were holding me down? Said Rorik. They're lucky that you didn't try. You probably have killed one of them instead.
The laughter was louder this time, and Harry scowled so fiercely it looked as if his face was folding in on itself. But then Gunnar saw the old man from the godhouse standing just beside Harry, smiling beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Gunnar felt the hairs on his neck stand up. So it had been him.
I've a good mind to come down there and kill you now,
Harry yelled.
Don't you dare, screamed Vigdis. Orm said he was to drown.
Don't argue with her, Harry, said Rorik. She'll take your other ear off. The crowd roared again, but Gunnar was watching the old man. He moved forward, peering over the quayside, then sought Gunnar's eyes. Of course, the quayside was supported by thick pilings, and behind them was a space which the sea never filled, however high the tide. If they could swim there, underwater, no one would see them from above, and they could wait until the crowd had gone.
The tide's coming in,
someone yelled, and the crowd cheered. Gunnar looked around. Sea water was rolling over the mud, making pools that swiftly overflowed. Soon it was up to his ankles and rising steadily.